Alright, so hello everybody. So today we're going to talk about classes, objects, and inheritance. So here's the thing. You might have seen some of my videos before. In C# I talked about classes, inheritance, and all the other thingamajig. In Python it breaks in the same fashion, but it is written differently, obviously, since it's a different programming language. And defining classes in Python is like really easy. Now I'm going to mention one class throughout this video that is probably one you've heard of if you were looking up tutorials about Python. It's one that's used all the time. So first off, let's create a really simple class. To define a class, you type in class, obviously, and then you give it a name. Let's call it sample class, for example. Then do the double dots thing, type it out, or indent it if you want to say it like that, and let's give it a property. A property is basically a thing that's specific for our class. And let's give it, I don't know, a integer with the value of 5. That's it, that's our class defined. There's nothing else you need to do. That's our entire class. Now, how do you actually call the class? How do you create an object of a class, essentially? So, we want to create an object. For example, I don't know, object named, I don't know, let's create sc1 as our object. sc1 will be our object, and it will be the object of our class. In our case, it will be our sample class, from our sample class. And to print out what we want, for example, the value 5, all we have to do is type out print, and inside of the brackets we have to write out the sc1 dot x, because that's what our property in our sample class is. And that should be pretty much it. That's how you create a class. That's how simple it is. Just a few lines of code and you've got your class created. So to test it out if it actually works, we're going to run this. I forgot to clean this out to CLS. There we go. And let's do this thing. So let's there we go. And if you run this, boom, it printed out 5. Bear in mind, 5 isn't mentioned anywhere here. It's mentioned in our class, so it obviously works. So yeah, so we got ourselves a class. So essentially what a class is, you fire out a class, give it a name, give it a property, for example, an integer with the value of 5, and then create an instance of the class, for example, sc1. Then what instance it is, it's an instance of our sample class, and it's an object, that's why these brackets are here, and then we just print out the value of the property, which is in our case the integer with its value 5, so our integer x with its value 5. So there's also another form of a function, and functions are used to basically assign values to different forms of data types. For example, we can assign values to numbers, to strings. I've talked about this previously. Let's create a really nice little sample application, which we'll call, let's say we want to create an application that writes out the name and the age of a person. So to do that, we're going to create a class called person, and we're going to get the double dots, and here comes the thing. So we need to define a function. Functions in Python are defined using the def syntax, and then we give it a function. A function in Python is defined like this. You can give it any name you want. However, it's much easier to use the one that's predefined. Now you can, the function in our classes, which we will call init. Init is a function that will be executed every single time the class is initialized. That's what init stands for. It will initialize itself as soon as the class has been called for. But now we need to give it some parameters in order to be used. To define its parameters, we're going to create a self parameter, name parameter, and age. Now, I kind of lied here by saying this. The age thing defines what we will use to reference these two parameters. So essentially, we could change this to whatever we want. The same thing goes for this part, but again, for simplicity's sake, init, all you need to remember is here you define a function that is going to be called as soon as the class has been initialized. It's the simplest form of a object, essentially, of a function. The self part here defines what kind of name it will have. For example, if you want to use the name parameter, which you have to type in, obviously include the double dots, indented by 1, and if you want to call it, if you want to call this parameter for this function specifically, you need to type out self dot name equals name. Same thing goes for age. Self dot age equals age. So what we've done here is we've defined ourselves a class with a function. The function is called init, and it's going to be initialized every single time we call that function. The function uses its own, essentially, an identifier for its parameters. So essentially it takes these two parameters and makes it its own by adding the self part before it. To call it, we need to do self.name, so the name of the person will be loaded into the function using the self.name variable. This is kind of like a variable, but it's essentially a parameter. The same goes for age. It hopefully makes sense. It will just assign the values to it. And also, one more thing. The class, the init function, is going to be called every single time the class is used to create a new object. So that's something to keep in mind. Now we need to create an instance of our class and give it some values. So to do that, we're going to create a p1 as person1. P1 as person1, cannot type. And we're going to call the person function, or person class, if you will, and we're going to give it some values right away. First, we're going to give it a string value for its name. For example, let's do John. Not Josh, but John. There we go. And let's give him the age of 36. That will be our number, our integer. One really cool thing about Python, you don't have to write out what it is, we just do it for you. And what we're going to do now is we can print out the object of that class. So since we've assigned it some values, all we have to do is type out p1.name, which will print out the name of our person1, which is John. And let's do print and p1 and .h. And what this will do, it will print out the name of our John person, which name, the age of our John person, which is 36. Now this does work. However, let me just show you that it does work first. So let's just launch it, and there you go. So what it did is it took the value John and loaded it into the function itself as a string. and then it took the number 36 and loaded it into itself as an age. And then we took the P1, which we've initialized here, and it took the name from John, which was written over here, and the age, which was over here. To show how easy it is to change, we're going to create another character. Let's create our second person, so P2. This person, let's call him Jack. Jack is a cool guy, the new kid on the block. And let's say he's 25 years old. But remember, we're still using the same function we used here. All we have to do now is we need to print out those words. We do print and do P2 dot name, and then do print again, and P2, I can now type P2 dot H. If we save this and run this, it should work. And as you can see, we have we have John of the age 36 and Jack of the age of 25. We could add some extra fancy things here just to make it look a bit prettier. In terms of the simplicity's sake, this is enough for us. However, this is not the only thing we can do. We can define other functions. For example, what we can do, we can create a function that will print out a set text unique to each character. Well, it is actually really easy to do. Let's just comment these out because we're not gonna use them. Or let's just remove them. We're not gonna use them anymore. We're going to keep both of our characters here. However, one thing we're going to do is we're going to add another, let's call it a function. Okay. So we're going to create another function. Let me actually separate this a little. I'm sorry, and we're going to call it, I don't know, sample of function. There we go. And we're going to just use the self part. So what it will do is it will take, what was it? So it's going to take the things right here in the self section. So it will basically take the name of the self section of the self name here and print it out, which is what we want to do. So we need to use the self parameter. So it will take the data that's stored, so the name and the age, and it will store it in the variable called self. So all we have to do now is we need to load our self variable, if that makes sense so far. It's basically a parameter, okay? The self is not a look. The self is not a variable. It's a parameter, and the parameter can reference the current instance of the class, which means that, for example, if we use the p1.function, which I will create soon, it will take the name and the age of this character, of this person. Let me just write this out and make it a bit easier to understand. So we're going to we're going to print out some text that will be unique to John. For example, my name is. Then we're going to call in self, which is a parameter that's for the current instance of our character. So self.name. Then we're going to add another plus sign, double quotes, and I am. Then we do self.h, double quotes, yes, old. And that's it. And we're going to end off this print section. And what we're going to do is we're going to, since we have our characters defined here, we can move on to the next section. So since we have created a sample function that is unique for each and every character, Basically what the self parameter does, it takes the current value of name and age and prints it out for each and every character that we've created in case our person's here. So person 1 and person 2. To use it for each and every person individually, what we do is use P1, for example, for John. Then we do dot sample func and then the brackets. Same thing will be done for P2. Dot sample func. So now what we did is we've created essentially two functions instead of our class. This one will be initialized whenever we initialize this, so we can load in our data. Our data is the name and the age of each person that we've created. And we load them into the self.name and self.age variables. Next thing we do is the parameters. Sorry, I need to keep my terminology correct. And then we have created another function called sample func, which takes the values of the parameter self, and then we use its different variables. Our variables are name and age. Well, self.name and self.age. So what we do is we write out my name is self.name, for example, my name is John, and I am self.age 36 years old. That's what it should write out. And the same thing goes for Jack. So it should say my name is Jack and I am 25 years old. Let's save it and let's run this bit of code. Well, what happened? Well, you see, it's a bit broken. I have written out something a bit in the wrong way, you know. Let me see. So we got the print, we got that, we got the age, def sample func, we got the print, my name is, self.name. Okay, let's make this a bit differently. Let's make it somewhat functional again. So we're going to create another print to make this simpler for ourselves. And I am. Let's just do 25. I don't think that's gonna work. I think it's going to throw up another error, as it did here, because it... Oh, I'm such a dunce. Okay, so I didn't read that. I was just dumb. Okay, so here's the thing. We need to convert it specifically into an str, or a string. And if you remember, we can convert it implicitly like this. So we're converting an integer into a string. That was the only thing that was wrong with this. See? Now it works. I just didn't convert it. My bad. Okay, let's run this again. And boom, there you have it. My name is John and I am 36 years old. My name is Jack and I'm 25 years old. I just forgot to convert it to a string. That's all that happened. Now, that's pretty much it. There's nothing else. Now we can also modify it so it doesn't have to stay like this. For example, we can set the age differently for each and every one of our participants. Let's make Jack a little older. To make him older, all we have to do is do P2, remember we're changing Jack's age, type in age, equal, and give him a new age. Let's make him, I don't know, 25 years older. Let's set it to 50. Let me just space this out to make it look a bit nicer. So what will happen now, it should say on the second line, my name is Jack and I am 50 years old. And boom, there it is, I am 50 years old. Again, we could make John a bit older to keep it fair, so p1.age, not apps, age equals, I don't know, let's make him 45. Why not? And there it is, he's now 45. Hooray! Now we can also delete objects. There are multiple. We can also delete like an entire property. We can delete a property or an entire object. Our object in this case is our person, and our person is Jack. Let's say we wanna remove someone. Let's say we want to remove Jack. To do that, we type in del and p2 because we're removing Jack. As you can see, it's not going to function because we've removed Jack. So if I comment this out, it should let us do it because we've removed Jack. So now only John is in that. So it won't let us do it because we've deleted Jack. So that's how you delete him. Or we could just delete his age, therefore rendering the function useless somewhat. So let's just try and remove just his age. To do that, let's just do the age parameter thing. And it will scream that the age isn't an attribute for our Jack character. So, for our Jack person, sorry. So that's how you deal with classes and inheritance, essentially. But these are just classes, but what about inheritance? Is it possible to inherit things from another class? Well, yes it is, you don't. So let's get rid of this and make it functional again. So let's just run this as it is. As you can see, it works, it's perfectly fine. Now let's say, and this is pretty much all you have to know about classes in Python, you know. Well, is it? Well, it's actually not. So let's say, how should I say this? So that's classes, you know, classes are really cool and stuff, but what we can do is we can create some sort of inheritance. Now, inheritance works in pretty much the same fashion, but the thing that's different is we're going to print it out in a different way. So we're going to keep everything as it is. However, there's one thing we're going to change. Since we have our class, all we have to do, let's say we want to create a student. We want to create another student. So for that, we're going to have to create another class. So let's say we have our two main characters, like Jack, for example. And we're going to create a student, for example, which will inherit things from our person class. Our person class has all the variables in it already. So the only thing left is to create another, child class. A child class will inherit some of the properties, if not all of them, from our person class, which is useful because you do not have to repeat yourself. But it's also great if you want to separate things, you know? So the thing you might want to do is you wanna let's create a class. Let's create a class called student. There we go. And it will inherit. To create inheritance in Python, you just put brackets behind the name of your class, and from which class you wanna inherit, you put that into the brackets. In our case, it's person. With that out of the way, the only thing left in order to pass on the attributes, we will just write pass, because pass will basically say, hey, I am a student, pass on to me these attributes. Along with the function, obviously. So now, what is left? Well, you see, the thing that is left is you look, in order to make it inherit some properties, to make it function essentially, is we're going to create another person, or just a student. Like, let's call it STD, because I don't know of a better name. And student. And what we're going to do is we're going to give him a name of, I don't know, Peter. And he is at the ripe age of 20. And what we should be able to do is run std for students dot sample function. I'm just experimenting now. I'm not really sure if it's gonna work. It did work, so that's how it inherits. It's a really simple inheritance example. You don't have to create a new function for a new class. You just can pass its properties onto another class, therefore making it really simple. So you can see I didn't do anything. I just reused the things that are inside of here. I didn't have to create an entirely new class with its own new init function. I just passed on the attributes from the person class and it works. So, is there anything else? There are also like super functions and stuff which will inherit all the methods, which is cool. But like, do you really need that? No, look. Let's say you wanna like, how should I say that? Let's say you wanna make a function that will look. Python also has a function that can basically make the child process, or the child class, sorry, which in our case is student, inherit all of the methods and properties from its parent. So it will take everything that it has as its own. So then we're gonna have to make a few changes to our code. To make those changes, I'm just gonna, well, yoink this, put it in here, and we're going to add in a superclass to use the super function. Just type in super, put the brackets in, dot, and then you just we're just going to copy this, remove this, and all we need is the name and age. I think it was like that. Yes, name and age. I think. I'm sorry. And what we can add to it is another parameter, essentially. So since he is a student and we have created our own let's call it our own properties, we can now add another property. So what do? Obviously you want to add a graduation year, because you know he's a student, he's going to graduate soon. So let's do self and then do graduation year, and let's say, I don't know, let's do 2025 for example as his graduation year. And with this, I don't know, well actually, you know what, no. Let's add to this a year, like, you know, and use this year parameter that we've just created. So essentially what we've created is another parameter called year, and we are going to take the year that was written into Peter at the back of his age. And let's say 2025 is the year he's going to graduate. Hence why we added another section here. Now, to make sure that it works, we're going to have to create a special print function. So we're going to go and do self. No, actually, no. We're going to have to create another print special for him. And we're going to copy this, paste that in, and I could actually define a special function for him. Or should I? Actually, I don't even have to do this. All I have to do to make sure that it works is just, I have the sample function, which is cool, but what we can do is add another print and write out I am going to graduate in the year, and then we do std dot graduation year, and that should be it theoretically, I think. Yes, I think that should be it. So let's print it out, and of course it has a problem with it. Obviously we cannot convert this to a string, so we can either convert it to a string here, but one thing I prefer to do is convert it into a string directly into the string itself, like that. So it spit out an error about not being a string. That's okay. See? Now it works. So, my name is Peter, and I am 20 years old. I'm going to graduate in the year 2025. So that's how you add another, like, special parameter for a inherited class. It's not that difficult, it's like really easy, and you can make a fairly impressive application using this. You can also add other methods and such, but look, we could in fact add another method that is a possibility, but like, let's say we don't want to print it out like this. It's not elegant, it doesn't look that nice. Well, to add another, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create another function inside of our class. Again, we're going to use the def part because why not? And what we are going to do next is, I don't know, let's call it student func, because why not? And we're going to use the self thing here once again. If I can type it out, that is. There we go. And we're going to print out basically the text that I have right here. Which means I'm going to graduate, and we're going to remove this and change it to self, because it won't otherwise work. So self.graduation year, it will be converted to a string right away. Now, to use it, it's actually really simple. All you have to do is type in std if you do not have caps. So std for student dot student func, and it will do the exact same thing, but we have defined it as a function, and therefore making our code look somewhat clean. And of course, it doesn't work. I don't know why. We're missing the double dots once again. So the double dots have stricken again. And that's it. It does the exact same thing as it did before, but it looks a lot cleaner and more elegant. So now there's a ton more other things you can do with Python, but these are pretty much the basics, like all the things you're going to need in order to create a fairly neat looking application for yourself to try at home. I'm just gonna resize it. There you go. So that's it. That's the application. It was essentially like a sort of a final application, but it's not. I plan on making another video about a different application that we're going to create, but knowing how to use classes and inheritance and such and everything that you need, is there anything more that you need to do with this? I mean, you don't even have to. Like, we can, like, you know, add, multiply, and divide like we would do normally. You can even create a full-fledged calculator if you want to, but all the basics I wanted to cover, all the things I wanted to talk about are covered in this. Now there are a bunch of other things like getting user input and such. I leave that for the final application that we're going to create. And what the application is a calculator. I know, shocker, right? The calculator won't use classes, I think. I'm not really sure how I want to structure this. But again, I'll try and make a simple example like I did with C#, and I'll go line by line, possibly, and I'll explain everything if I can, so I can show you guys how you can create a fairly nice looking application using Python. On that note, I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video, and if you are new here and you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe, if you are not subscribed, of course. And I wish you guys a very I don't know what I want to say right now. Look, just stay safe, have fun, and make sure that you do not waste a ton of time doing nothing. So yeah.